there, it's Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to be creating another fun fold card. I have been enjoying doing these recently as something just a little bit different to change it up. I am starting off with two standard size card bases, so these are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I will often trim off just a tiny little slither, like tiny, off one of the sides of the card, and then that way when we put them together, so the side that I have overlapped and I'm putting the right hand card here is the one that I have taken off the little slither, and that little slither will go into the fold of the other card, and that way when you close it, the card will close really nicely and lay nice and flat. So once I have that sorted, I kind of wiggle it around, and I've used some liquid glue, some Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish. That is what I'm using to glue these together. A nice strong hold glue, and you can see the cards sit nice and flat when I close them. Then once I have the card base sorted, I'm going to grab my paper trimmer, and my paper trimmer has a scoring blade on it and a cutting blade on it, and I'm going to use the scoring blade, and I'm going to score in at 2 1/8 of an inch on both ends of the card. Now essentially that is just the halfway point, so if you're making a different sized card, you can see I have scored it halfway on both of those side flaps, and I'm going to fold these backwards and then crease them really nicely. If you are doing, as I said, a different size, then all you do is find the middle, and this will work exactly the same. I know that with card making, I like things to kind of be really simple if I want to change it to a different size. I am not a big one for a whole lot of measurements and things. I eyeball a lot of things. I'll often find the midway points and those sorts of things. I don't mind doing that, but I don't love a whole lot of measuring. I like to be able to make it, change it up for whatever size card I am doing. But speaking of, I'm going to find the halfway point down the side of these flaps, and I'm just putting a tiny little pencil mark here. And again, it doesn't matter what size your card is, just find the halfway point, and you can see I've got a tiny wee mark in each one. Then I'm going to go from the corner of the top of my fold to that little pencil mark. So essentially I'm just cutting off the corner. This will all kind of make sense once you see it in a minute. And then if you are trying to get the exact same corner, often you can put this corner in here, turn it upside down so it's the opposite, and then you'll make sure that you get exactly the same cut. But it should work fine if you're going from your fold, from your score line, the top of your score line, to that little pencil mark, and we are taking off both corners on both sides. So again, doesn't matter what size your card is, you're able to kind of do this as well. And if you've got a more square card that you're creating, then you are going to have a kind of square diamond in the middle, whereas this one I've created is more of an elongated diamond, I guess. Then I have this paper pad here. This is the Vicki Boutin Storyteller paper pad, and this is a 6 by 8 paper pad. There's 24 sheets in it, and this is one of those paper pads that I could pretty easily hoard, and I just really like so many of the prints in here, and that is what I'm looking for when I buy a paper pad. I want to make sure that I like the absolute majority. I want to make sure I can actually use way more than, you know, like half or a few of the sheets. I want to make sure that I like all of the sheets in this paper pad, and I can see a way that I'm going to use them. So I've pulled out one of the sheets, that yellowy dotted one, and that is going to be part of my kind of background. And then this one here is actually so gorgeous. These birds are kind of calling to me, and it kills me a little bit to cut into it, but I want to make sure I'm using the things that I have in my stash. They're not just there for decoration. So I am going to cut out a couple of these little birds and use them as my focal point. Now, obviously, if you have a stamp that is going to work well, then that's easy. You can use anything. Sometimes I have seen on the sides of like tissue boxes, Kleenex boxes, there are gorgeous designs that you can cut out an element and no one would even know where it came from. You can use all sorts of things to create your focal points on your cards, and it just so happened that I really love those gorgeous birds and they were speaking to me, so that is going to be the focal point for today. Now I have cut up that sheet that I pulled out as well, and I've cut these down so there is a tiny little border that is going to go on my front panels there. Then here I am going to create, this is just a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel. I am finding the midway point of all 4 sides. So, I mean, for this card, it's going to be the 2 3/4 mark on the long side, and then on the short top side, it's going to be the 2 1/8 of a mark. And so I'm going to use my trimmer and create a diamond that is going to fit precisely the same on the front of my card. Now, I guess here you could use any shape you wanted to. There are so many ways to kind of change up this design and yet have a similar kind of feature. So this is just what I'm doing today. But if you are inspired by this card, then I would love to see your creations. Over on my Facebook page is a great place to be able to post photos and post your makes and cards and things that were inspired by these videos. So I will leave a link to that down in the description box below too. I am fussy cutting out these gorgeous little birds, and there is no way that I'm going to fussy cut their feet, so I did trim those off, and we'll pop those back on later on. Then I have the word Fragments stamp set here. I am using some VersaFine Onyx black ink to stamp these out on a piece of scrap paper, and then my nice long bladed scissors. You can definitely use a trimmer if you're not confident using scissors, but I find the long bladed ones, I get a really straight cut and I can cut these out nicely. Then I know that that is my sentiment. However, I kind of felt like this was going to be a bit plain for the front, so I had a plan and was inspired by the very original paper that I actually cut the birds out of. So this is the Leaf Clusters stamp set. This is from Altenew, and you will have seen this in quite a few videos by now. I have 2 favorite stamp sets at the moment that I cannot stop using, and that is good because we want to get value for money when we purchase a stamp set, that is for sure. So I'm kind of laying everything out how I want it to go, how I think it's going to sit. Then I've got 3 of the stamps from that stamp set. There's kind of 2 different types of stamps. There's kind of these finer, more delicate leaves, and then slightly heavier leaves in the stamp set. So you can kind of choose which ones you want to go with, and these are the slightly more delicate, slimmer leaves. Then I have 3 shades of green. And I'm going to do the same technique where I create kind of a faux layered stamp look. So it's going to look like there's actually kind of more than one layer to these stamps. Layered stamp sets are really popular these days, and they often cost a little bit more because there's a lot of stamps. And it's nice to be able to take a single stamp set that we already have and kind of create that look. And to do that, I just stamp out the first layer in kind of a lighter color, and I just stamp the stamp with that, and then I come back in with a finger dauber and a slightly darker layer, and then I do the outsides of the leaves. And I actually have an entire video where I create the whole card like this, so I will link that video down in the description box below in case you are interested in checking that out. Then once I cleaned off the stamps, I've repositioned them to add in a little bit more foliage. I'm adding the lighter green, I think that's the peeled paint in the Distress Oxide range. And then I'm adding some Mowed Lawn or Rustic Wilderness, I think it's Mowed Lawn I added to the edges. Doesn't make a huge difference in this card, but I think in person you can really tell. And you can use any inks for this. You can use Oxide inks, you can use Pigment inks, you can use dye inks to create that layered look. It works for so many different options, which is really, really good. And I am going to pop those little birds up on some foam squares, and I have popped my sentiment up on some foam squares, and then I need to pop those little legs back in for the birds. So I just took a quick look at the paper pad that they came from, the sheet that they came from, and kind of roughly copied them with a little black fine liner, and that way I don't have to do any fussy cutting, so that makes it easy for me, much, much better than trying to fussy cut the legs. Then I'm taking the peeled paint finger dauber that I used for the leaves, and I'm just doing a little bit of shading around the outside. Now here is where I'm going to adhere this down to the left hand flap only. I'm not going to put glue on the right because obviously that would glue the card shut. And my little diamond fits directly on top of the flaps that we already have there. And then I'm just going to press it down nicely, make sure it's all lined up and in the right place. Then at this point I decided that I would actually add a little bit more, seeing as I had plenty, because this is a 6x8 paper pad, so I had enough left over that I could do the insides as well. Again, you could kind of have something really contrasting. I just went for the same thing, seeing as it was sitting here in front of me, and I'm going to trim these down on my trimmer so that they give the exact same look as the outside. Use a little bit of liquid glue so I can pop them in place, and then this is kind of going to be the inside of the card, and then obviously you would write on the very inside panel there, and no one is going to be able to see it when the card is all closed up. And then that is pretty much my finished card for today. So another fun fold card that is something a little bit different than what I usually create. This card stands up beautifully by itself, and if you are interested in having a look or checking out any of the supplies that I have used in today's video, I will have them all listed in the description box below this video. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!